My name is Frank Peterson, and for 30 years, I worked at the same factory, shaping metal parts with heavy machines. It was honest work, steady, and it paid the bills, though we were never rich. My greatest achievement wasn't anything I made at the factory, but my son, Alex. He was the reason I kept going, the reason I worked all the overtime I could grab. Alex was destined for greatness. That's what my wife, Clara, always told everyone. He was smart, clean-cut, and he was the first person in our family to get into a big, prestigious school, Kingston University. We lived a very simple life in our small, quiet suburban house. I wore my worn-out work boots and the same kind of plaid shirts year after year, and Claire became an expert at saving every penny with coupons. Everything we did, every dollar we held back, was a direct investment in Alex's future. We saw him as a golden ticket, the person who would finally bring honor and comfort to our simple name. This absolute faith, this powerful, blinding pride, was what allowed me to believe the most outrageous lies. It made me deaf to the warnings and blind to the truth. I should have listened sooner. I remember the day Alex left for college. It felt like a national holiday. Clara was crying with pure joy, and I just kept giving Alex simple, firm advice. Study hard, son. Make us proud. I truly thought that after he stepped onto that campus, my hardest job as a father was done. I believed I had set him up for success. But the financial troubles, which I now know were fake, began during Alex's second year at Kingston. He came home for Christmas break, but the joy was gone from him. He was tense, jumpy, and spent most of his time looking at his phone, whispering into it. One cold, miserable evening, he finally sat me down in the kitchen. "Dad," he said, and his voice was low and shaky, "I have to talk to you about the school fees." "It's bad." I patted his shoulder. I told him not to worry, that the regular tuition was tough, but we always found a way. He looked down at the scratch wood of our old kitchen table, and then back up at me, his eyes wide with fake panic. "The fees have skyrocketed, Dad. They created a new, advanced engineering program, and it's extremely expensive." Alex went on to tell me a long, complicated story. He said that this new advanced program was mandatory for anyone aiming for a top job. He claimed the total cost for just that single year, including special mandatory international program fees and an equipment bond, had somehow reached an impossible sum. He finally said the total fee was $1 million. I couldn't breathe. The number felt huge, monstrous. It was far more money than I had ever seen or imagined. I asked him how this was possible at a public university. He explained that the program was unique, run by a partnership with a foreign, private industry group, and that if he dropped out now, all the fees we'd already paid would be instantly lost, and he would never be allowed to reapply. "It's a one-time thing, Dad," he begged. "The school guarantees a huge starting salary, $300,000 if I finish. We just need to find this money." Clara, who heard the end of the conversation, rushed in and wrapped her arms around Alex. "We'll find a way, Frankie," she promised, her faith unshakable. "Our brilliant son is worth any sacrifice." The shame of potentially failing him felt overwhelming. It was $1 million, a number that terrified me. But the thought of my son's future being ruined by a lack of money was worse. I decided right then, in that moment of blind devotion, that I would find the money. I kept the full amount a secret from Clara, only telling her it was a large, necessary investment. My plan was simple and devastating. I would sell everything. First, our house. It was quickly put on the market and sold. The money from the sale, combined with my entire factory pension and my 401k, 30 years of steady, patient saving, gave me just under the required amount, about $950,000. We moved into a tiny, depressing rented apartment. Clara cried when we left our home, but I assured her it was temporary. I told Alex I had the money but would only send it in 3 separate, tracked payments over 8 months. I told him this was a condition. I needed to see proof of his academic progress and official university payment ledgers after each transfer. He agreed to the terms immediately and too easily. The first wire transfer was the hardest thing I ever did. It was $400,000. I went to the bank, my hands shaking badly, and I sent the money to an account Alex had provided. He insisted it was a university's special international student fund. A few days later, he sent me a scan of a document. It looked perfectly real, complete with a gold crest of Kingston University, a complex list of program fees, and a believable signature. I felt a brief, hollow sense of success. I had saved him. But my life was now drastically changed. Claire and I were living in the small, dark rental, sharing the expense of rent and food from her part-time job stocking shelves. I went back to the factory, now laboring with no retirement cushion, no home equity, and a terrifying, heavy secret. I never told Clara the actual amount was $1 million. Her faith was already too fragile, and I feared the truth would break her completely. Over the next year, I made 2 more massive transfers, bringing the total sent to Alex up to $950,000. Each time, he provided another official-looking, convincing receipt. Alex seemed to flourish. He was always talking excitedly about his brilliant future and the important, successful people he was supposedly networking with. But, as I feared, the financial demands did not stop there. Near the end of the supposed $1 million year, he called me again, sounding even more frantic than before. "Dad, the school is hitting me with a $50,000 penalty. I missed a very small deadline for an academic review, and now the full penalty is due immediately. If I don't pay it, I'm kicked out, and all the previous money is lost." I was tapped out. I had almost nothing left in my bank account. Desperate, I worked every shift of overtime I could physically manage, sold my old, reliable pickup truck, and borrowed a significant sum from my lifelong factory friend, Gary. I transferred that final $50,000. Now, the full total was exactly $1 million. Every penny I had ever earned, every cent of my planned future, was gone. I felt physically and emotionally depleted, but again, I had a brief moment of perverse satisfaction. I had kept my promise. I had not failed my son, but the small, nagging requests continued to pour in. "Dad, the necessary advanced textbooks cost $500. Dad, I need a new, very powerful laptop for my engineering thesis, $1,200. Dad, the required field trip for the international program is $7,000. I kept giving. I sold my old fishing tackle, the coin collection I had saved since I was a boy, and even my specialized factory tools, piece by piece. I was constantly working double shifts, pushing my tired body to its limit. Clara noticed I was thin and pale, and she was genuinely worried. I just told her the factory was demanding more production, lying to the woman who had stood by me for 30 years. My reality was that my life had shrunk down to the size of a few dollars, while Alex, based on his expensive demands, was living a life of high stakes, exclusive education. I started to see the cracks. Alex never spoke about his professors' names or detailed his classwork. He only spoke about the potential future salary and the elite networking he was doing. The real turning point, the moment the light of truth finally began to shine on the mountain of lies, happened one Tuesday afternoon in the factory break room. I was proudly showing Gary, my friend who had loaned me money, a picture of Alex on my old phone. Gary squinted at the picture, then looked suddenly very uncomfortable. "Frank," he said, lowering his voice, "I saw Alex last month. I was driving near Kingston to visit my sister." My heart seized up. "You saw him? How was he doing? Was he studying hard?" Gary hesitated for a long, painful minute. "He was driving a very nice car, Frank." Gary finally admitted, "A brand new black sports car. The kind you notice immediately. I saw him pull into a huge, modern, expensive apartment complex. Definitely not the old student dorms he told us about." The cold dread that had been growing in my stomach since the first $1 million request finally turned into ice. A sports car? Expensive apartments? Alex had always described his living situation as cramped, old, and full of roommates. He claimed he walked everywhere to save every penny. I asked Gary again, my voice trembling, if he was absolutely certain it was Alex. Gary nodded firmly. "I've known the boy since he was little, Frank. I saw him clear as day." The image of my worn-out work boots suddenly contrasted sharply with the picture of the black sports car. I knew, deep down, I had been played for a fool. I kept my outer composure, but inside, a quiet rage was building. The seed of doubt was now a fully grown, toxic tree. My mind raced, reviewing all the ridiculous details that hadn't added up. The $1 million tuition, the vague, complicated answers, the immediate need for emergency cash, and now the expensive, showy car. I knew I couldn't confront him without proof. I couldn't risk him lying his way out of it again. I told Clara I had to go to a critical, long factory seminar out of town. The next morning, I drove my old, rusty rental car on the long, miserable highway trip to Kingston University. I went straight to the large, official administration building. I waited patiently in the long line to speak to a financial aid officer. When I finally got a chance to sit down, I introduced myself as Frank Peterson, the proud father of Alex, a student in the advanced engineering program. I asked about the $1 million tuition, hoping for some explanation, some miracle confirmation that my son wasn't a liar. The financial aid officer, a kind-looking older woman named Mrs. Miller, smiled genuinely at me. "I'm sorry, Mr. Peterson," she said gently, "but there must be a terrible mistake. Kingston University's tuition, even for our most specialized technical programs, is approximately $55,000 per year. We have never, in our entire history, had a program that costs anything remotely close to $1 million. And we certainly don't have mandatory international program fees of that massive size." My vision blurred. I was lightheaded. I pulled out the supposed university receipts Alex had sent me, the ones I had trusted with my entire life. Mrs. Miller looked them over, her professional smile completely gone. She pointed to a few small, subtle mistakes. "The font on this letterhead, Mr. Peterson, it's slightly different from our official documents. And the signature? That is definitely not the dean's signature. I'm afraid these are sophisticated fakes. My $1 million, my home, my entire life savings, all gone not to education, but to a calculated, terrible lie. The betrayal was complete. I left the university in a haze of cold fury and overwhelming emptiness. I didn't drive home. Instead, I drove straight to the modern, expensive apartment complex Gary had described. I parked my car where it wouldn't be easily noticed, and I waited. After about an hour, the black sports car, shiny and new, pulled into the lot. Alex stepped out, wearing a sharp, expensive suit and holding a high-end leather bag. He wasn't alone. A beautiful young woman, dressed in designer clothes, was with him. They were laughing easily, carrying large shopping bags from stores I couldn't even afford to look at. This was the life that my 30 years of constant, hard, honest labor had paid for. This was a luxurious life he was living while I was working double shifts and sleeping on a cheap, uncomfortable mattress in a dark rental. I watched them walk into the building, the bitterness of the betrayal now a cold, hard lump in my chest. I knew I couldn't just confront him now. I needed all the facts, and I needed a plan for public justice. I returned home, telling Clara that the factory seminar had been long, boring, and very technical. But from that day on, I started leading a careful double life. By day, I was a tired, reliable factory worker. By night, I became a focused, obsessed investigator. I immediately went back to my bank and requested all the official records for the account Alex had given me for the wire transfers. It was exactly as I feared. It wasn't a university fund at all. It was a private account, registered to a shadowy shell company based in the Cayman Islands, a perfect way to hide money from tax authorities and his gullible father. I then spent hours online, researching and finding the best professional private investigator I could possibly afford. I hired Mr. Jones, a quiet, serious man who specialized in complex financial fraud and background checks. I handed him all the fake receipts and the detailed bank transfer records. I told him to find out exactly where my $1 million had gone and how Alex was managing this incredibly elaborate, cruel lie. Mr. Jones was professional and worked with chilling efficiency. Within 2 weeks, he had uncovered the full, terrible picture. Alex wasn't just lying about the fees. He had dropped out of Kingston University completely after his first year, before he ever even asked me for the first payment of the $1 million. The money had been used for pure luxury. The initial $400,000 went to purchasing the black sports car, completely furnishing the expensive apartment, and setting himself up with an incredibly lavish, high-rolling lifestyle. The rest of the money had been carefully and systematically moved into various high-yield investment schemes and several different offshore accounts, managed by a professional financial advisor he had hired. Alex was not a struggling, smart student. He was a sophisticated, well-funded con artist, living entirely off the sale of his father's life and future. Mr. Jones's report revealed even darker layers to Alex's criminal activities. Alex was using the assumed prestige of Kingston University and his wealthy, fake persona to gain access to exclusive social clubs, and even secured a large business loan for a supposed tech startup. He achieved this using his fake university documents, his sophisticated appearance, and a completely fictitious story of a massive inheritance. He had completely transformed into a calculated liar and thief. Mr. Jones also provided one final, crucial piece of information. The beautiful young woman Alex was dating wasn't just a simple girlfriend. She was the only daughter of a very powerful, highly respected judge in the state. Alex was planning to propose to her and host a massive, high society engagement party the following month. This grand party was clearly intended to cement his fake persona and gain access to the judge's wealth and powerful network. I knew the engagement party was the perfect setting for my final move. The idea of a quiet, private confrontation was completely gone. Alex needed to face the full, public weight of his lies. I looked at the factory schedule. My 30th work anniversary with the company was coming up, and the company was planning a small, required party for me at the local union hall. This party happened to fall on the exact same day as Alex's grand engagement party. Of course, I was not invited to Alex's party. He had told Claire and me that he was having a small, very informal gathering because his fiancée's family was extremely private and hated big crowds. I didn't let any emotion show. I kept going to work, smiling a fake smile, taking every extra shift, and pretending that everything in my life was perfectly normal. But inside, I was calculating the final steps of my plan. I was saving every last scrap of my emotional and physical energy for the moment I would finally stop being the foolish victim and become the judge of my son's crimes. The day of the engagement party arrived. It was being held at a huge, ridiculously beautiful lakeside venue, the kind of place that charged more for one single event than I had ever earned in an entire year working. I drove my old, rusty rental car to the venue. I was wearing my best, but still quite worn, suit. I was definitely not on the guest list, but my private investigator, Mr. Jones, had arranged for a friend on the catering staff to let me in a back entrance. Before I left the apartment, I made a difficult, critical phone call. I called the office of the prominent judge, Alex's future father-in-law. I told him who I was, Alex's real father, and that I possessed incredibly important information he needed to hear immediately. He was naturally very skeptical, angry, and dismissive, but the serious, unwavering tone of my voice, combined with a simple, stark mention of $1 million in fraud, was enough to make him agree to a very brief, very tense meeting at his downtown office. I told him I would be there first, before the party. My first stop was a judge's massive office building. I was taken straight up to his suite. I walked in, carrying my worn leather briefcase, which was now filled with the irrefutable evidence. The judge, a tall, stern, and obviously powerful man, sat behind his huge desk. He didn't offer me a seat, forcing me to stand. I ignored his open hostility and calmly opened the briefcase. I handed him the stack of official bank statements, the wire transfer records, and Mr. Jones's long, detailed investigative report, which included hard proof of Alex's sports car and expensive apartment leases. I also gave him copies of the fake university receipts. "Sir," I said clearly, my voice steady despite the rapid pounding in my chest, "your future son-in-law is a financial fraudster. He is currently living off the $1 million he stole from me. His father, through a sophisticated, year-long lie, he dropped out of school completely over a year ago." The judge slowly, meticulously read the entire report. His powerful face went from initial anger to pure disbelief and finally to an expression of cold, dangerous fury. The judge finished reading the terrible truth and looked up, his eyes burning with outrage. "Mr. Peterson," he said in a low, quiet, but terrifying voice, "you have provided undeniable, substantial proof. I will protect my daughter from this criminal. What precisely do you want from me now?" I looked him straight in his powerful eyes. "I want justice, sir. I want my son to face the public, ultimate consequences of his actions, and I want to expose the terrible lie he built for everyone to see. He is at his engagement party right now. He thinks he's about to win his grand prize, your family name and connections. I want you to be there when I finally show him the complete, shattering reality of his criminal life." The judge paused, thinking deeply, and then he simply nodded once. "I'll be there, Mr. Peterson. This stops tonight. My family will not be disgraced." I left his office, feeling a powerful mixture of terrible fear and unbreakable determination. I now had the most powerful ally in the state. The real, mind-blowing drama, the ultimate moment of public reckoning, was finally about to begin. I drove to the lakeside venue, my hands shaking on the wheel of the rental car. I found a catering entrance and slipped inside. The room was breathtakingly gorgeous. Hundreds of important-looking people in expensive gowns and tuxedos were talking loudly. Champagne was flowing, and a massive band was playing soft music. Alex and his beautiful fiancée stood on a decorated stage, looking like royalty as they smiled for professional photographers. My son looked like a prince, but he was a total, absolute fraud. I walked slowly through the crowded room. No one paid any attention to me, the old, tired factory worker in a slightly worn suit. I made my way through the maze of tables to the powerful judge, who was standing stiffly next to his elegantly dressed wife. He gave me a sharp, private nod, acknowledging my presence and the plan. The music suddenly stopped, and a powerful spotlight focused on the stage. Alex was holding a microphone, ready to give the grand toast. This was my moment. I walked right up to the stage, climbed the 2 small steps, and stood directly next to my son. Alex's wide, confident smile immediately vanished. His face went instantly pale, a terrible mixture of shock, fear, and pure rage. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "You can't be here," he whispered fiercely, his voice low and vibrating with panic. The huge crowd murmured loudly, sensing the sudden, drastic shift in the party's mood. I calmly took the microphone directly out of his hand. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice strong and clear, projecting over the entire room. "I sincerely apologize for interrupting this beautiful, expensive celebration. My name is Frank Peterson, and I am Alex's father. I'm here because my son is absolutely right. I must be here." I paused dramatically and looked directly into the eyes of the judge, and then at Alex's beautiful fiancée, whose face was completely confused. Tonight, Alex is celebrating his future. But I think it is time that everyone here finally understood the true, actual foundation of that future. I looked directly at the stunned crowd, making sure I held their attention. My son told me that his school tuition for one single year was $1 million. And I, his devoted father, paid it. I sold my family's home, cashed in my entire factory pension, and gave him my entire life savings. I gave him the full $1 million. The gasps that swept through the enormous room were loud and collective. The number alone was shocking. "But that money," I continued, speaking clearly and slowly, "did not go to Kingston University. It went to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. It went to fund this expensive apartment, this flashy black car, these designer clothes, and this entire lavish life you are all witnessing tonight." I looked straight at Alex, whose face was now pure white, like bleached bone. "You haven't been in school for over a year, Alex. You dropped out. You are not a brilliant engineer. You are a financial con artist and a thief." The silence that followed was heavy and complete. Alex's fiancée started crying, her hand pressed over her mouth in shock. The judge finally stepped forward, his powerful voice sounding like thunder in the stunned room. "Alex," he commanded, looking down at my son, "is what your father's saying true?" Did you defraud him of $1 million and drop out of Kingston University as a common thief? Alex stood frozen on the stage, his eyes darting frantically between me and the judge. He couldn't form a single word. I opened my briefcase, took out the official university's confirmation letter, and showed the crowd the fake receipts. He faked these documents. I declared, the university has confirmed they are professional forgeries. Then, the judge delivered the final blow. In light of this undeniable evidence, I have contacted the police department. Furthermore, the large bank loan you secured for your tech startup, which you secured using these fraudulent university documents, is now under federal investigation. This engagement is over, and your future career is completely finished. My son, the man who had stolen my entire life, finally collapsed emotionally. He looked suddenly small, like a frightened little boy. The police arrived at the beautiful venue within minutes. They took Alex away in handcuffs, right in front of the horrified, hushed guests. The beautiful engagement party instantly disintegrated into a chaotic scene of social shame and scandal. The judge and his wife approached me. They were apologetic for being fooled, but utterly firm in their desire for justice. I stood there, watching my son led away, and I felt no real joy, only a strange, cold, consuming emptiness. I had won the battle for truth, but I had lost everything in the process. I had exposed a terrible lie, but the price of that truth had been the complete destruction of my family. I walked out of the venue, past the bewildered guests, and drove home, knowing I had to face the final, hardest challenge, telling Claire the full, devastating truth about her golden son. Claire was home in our tiny rental apartment, sitting quietly on the old sofa, watching television. She was excited, waiting patiently for me to tell her all the boring details of my factory seminar. I sat next to her and told her the entire unbelievable story, from the $1 million lie to the sports car, the fake receipts, and the ultimate public arrest at the engagement party. When I finished speaking, she didn't cry immediately. She just stared at me, her eyes wide and completely blank. "Our Alex," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He's a good boy, Frankie. He wouldn't do something like that." It took me hours, showing her the actual bank statements, the police report, and the proof in the university, before the horrifying reality finally sank into her mind. She broke down, her intense grief mixed with terrible, crushing guilt. She blamed herself for spoiling him and instilling too much pride. I held her tight, and for the first time in years, we were united, connected by the same painful truth. Alex was charged and convicted of fraud. He received a heavy sentence, and he will be forced to pay restitution for decades. The money is slowly being recovered from the offshore accounts. But my factory friend Gary and the union saw what I had done and realized my sacrifice. They started a fund to help me recover some of my lost retirement. I got a few pieces of my old life back, including a small down payment on a new, modest home. I am no longer rich, but I am finally free. I learned that the greatest lie is often the one we choose to believe out of blind, simple love. Now, I rebuild my life, one honest day at a time, finally free from the impossible weight of my son's $1 million lie.